I didn't realize we were already divided until the day we sat around the table, pretending we weren't. There was coffee, untouched, papers neatly stacked, polite voices. The room felt calm, but it was the kind of calm that exists right before something breaks. I remember thinking how strange it was that grief had brought us together physically, yet placed us so far apart emotionally. At first, the conversation wasn't about possessions. It never is. It was about fairness, about intentions, about what they would have wanted. Everyone spoke carefully, as if choosing the wrong word might reveal too much. I listened more than I spoke, convinced that silence would keep me neutral. I thought distance would protect me, but neutrality doesn't exist when loss enters a family. It only delays alignment. Mini hooks appeared early, subtle, and easy to dismiss. A raised eyebrow when someone mentioned the house. A pause that lasted just a second too long when the topic of money came up. A laugh that didn't reach the eyes. I noticed these things but told myself they were just part of grief. Everyone reacts differently, I thought. I didn't want to become suspicious of people I had loved my entire life. We told ourselves this wasn't about greed. That story was important. It allowed us to speak without shame. We framed everything as responsibility, as practicality. Who needed what? Who had sacrificed more? Who had already received enough in the past? Each sentence sounded reasonable on its own. Together, they formed something sharper. I remember the moment I first felt uncomfortable with myself. It wasn't when someone raised their voice or accused another outright. It was when I began rehearsing arguments silently in my head. When I caught myself calculating outcomes instead of mourning. That shift felt small, almost invisible, but it mattered. The loss itself had been heavy, but clean. Death has a way of simplifying emotions. The aftermath did the opposite. It complicated everything. Memories were suddenly reinterpreted through ownership. Kindness became evidence. Old conflicts resurfaced disguised as concern. I watched our shared history fracture into individual narratives, each one carefully edited to justify a claim. I told myself I was above it, that I wasn't like the others, that my attachment was emotional, not material. That belief allowed me to feel superior, and blindness often hides inside superiority. Many hooks returned in the form of resentment I didn't want to acknowledge. A flash of irritation when someone spoke confidently about decisions that affected everyone. A quiet anger when my hesitation was interpreted as agreement. I began to realize that silence wasn't neutrality. It was consent. What disturbed me most wasn't what people wanted. It was how quickly love became conditional, how easily grief transformed into entitlement, how effortlessly we shifted from we to mine. I started questioning whether unity had ever been as solid as I remembered, or whether it had simply never been tested like this before. There were moments, small, almost embarrassing ones, where I recognized myself in behaviors I judged in others. Wanting acknowledgement, wanting fairness to lean slightly in my favor, wanting to feel seen. Those realizations were uncomfortable because they blurred the line between victim and participant. Somewhere in the middle of all this, I came across reflections about conflict after loss, not advice, not solutions, just observations. About how material disputes aren't really about objects, but about unresolved emotional hierarchies. About how grief doesn't create selfishness. It exposes it. These ideas didn't accuse anyone. They simply mirrored what I was living. The family meetings became more structured, more formal. Lawyers were mentioned casually, like tools rather than threats. Language shifted. We stopped saying names and started saying shares and rights. I felt a tightening in my chest every time someone said fair, because fairness had become a weapon, not a principle. I noticed how memory itself became unstable. Events were remembered differently depending on who spoke. Promises were recalled selectively. Affection was quantified. I began questioning my own recollections. Had things really been as warm as I thought? Or had I romanticized the past to avoid confronting the present? Many hooks turned inward. I caught myself rehearsing explanations for future conversations that hadn't happened yet, preparing defenses instead of processing grief. I wasn't just losing my family as unity, I was losing access to my own emotional clarity. The erosion wasn't loud, it was methodical. Every meeting took something with it, a little trust, a little warmth, a little patience. We left each gathering more organized on paper and more fractured in spirit. No one acknowledged that trade-off. We pretended efficiency was progress. The psychological turning point didn't come with an argument. It came with a realization so quiet it almost slipped past me. Even if I won, I would lose. The object of conflict no longer mattered. What mattered was the version of myself I was becoming in order to compete. That realization scared me more than the possibility of injustice. I saw how easily I had stepped into a role I never intended to play, how grief had lowered my defenses just enough for resentment to settle in comfortably. In the final quarter of this story, the real twist revealed itself, not externally, but internally. The power struggle wasn't destroying the family because of money. It was destroying it because it replaced meaning. The loss had already taken someone from us. The fight was taking everything else. The devastating truth was this: the conflict didn't expose who they were. It exposed who we all were when love was no longer reinforced by presence. The inheritance wasn't the house or the accounts. It was the fracture itself. What finally shifted wasn't the outcome of the dispute. It was my relationship to it. I stopped trying to preserve unity by sacrificing my awareness. I stopped confusing peace with silence. I didn't become aggressive or righteous. I simply became honest with myself first. Looking back, the story reframes itself completely. The fight didn't begin after the loss. It began the moment we believed that material things could replace emotional reckoning. The inheritance wasn't what we fought over. It was what we lost while fighting. If this reflection resonates, if you've seen how loss can quietly turn love into competition, there is a thoughtful guide that explores these patterns. With depth and clarity, without blame or drama. You can download the ebook in the description. The link is in the description.